It's August 10, 2018, and the sun begins to set on yet another beautiful late summer day in Seattle. The Seattle Mariners are in Houston for Game 2 of what will end up being a clean 4-game sweep of the Astros.
The Seattle Seahawks had just kicked off their preseason game. At that time, the team was in flux. Paul Allen had just died. The Legion of Boom was officially gone. We had lost a substantial amount of players in free agency, and anxiety in Seattle was at an all-time high.
At the Mariners' home stadium, Safeco Field, excited concertgoers flow through the gates, buzzing in anticipation for the second of 2 sold-out Pearl Jam home show concerts.
Just 11 miles south of the ballpark, at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, a man begins taxiing down the runway in a Bombardier Q400 74-seat twin-turboprop passenger airplane. As a baggage handler for Horizon Air, a regional subsidiary of Alaska Airlines, this man has plenty of experience around these airplanes, but he is not a licensed pilot, and he is certainly not authorized to be flying this plane.
Air traffic control signals to the cabin. The pilot does not respond. At 7:33 p.m., the Q400 lifts off. 1 hour and 15 minutes later, it will crash into the woods of a barely populated nearby island, killing its sole occupant while turning him into an instant folk hero for some of the internet's most poisoned brains. This is the story of Richard Beebo Russell, the Sky King of Seattle.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds. I'm the Worst of All Possible Joshes.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians. And you may notice that AJ is not here.
He's scouting out locations at a book depository in Texas. So this week, and you may have heard that from our intro, we're going to be doing something a little different.
Yeah.
Normally on our show, we just do case studies and we talk about a piece of media or a set of media by a creator or something like that. This time around, we are talking about an event that actually happened, how it was covered contemporaneously, and then how it was received.
Yeah.
Content advisory up top for this. We are going to be talking about suicide a lot.
Basically the whole episode, yeah.
And we are also going to be reading a whole bunch of posts by some of the most cracked racist weirdos you can possibly imagine. For some of you, that might be a perk. I'm just throwing that out there. And to do this story, I should welcome our guest now because he actually pitched this story to me, and I'm so excited to dig into it. He is one of the co-hosts of the podcast Western Kabuki, which is the premier podcast about what's going on online. He's also a co-host of the NFL podcast 60 Minute Drill, and you may also know him from his unparalleled work in tormenting a pervert named Grums online. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
You told me that this is a story that you have long wanted to tell on a podcast. So why is that? What is it about this story that still resonates with you?
For context, this happened like in my backyard. And while I did not actually see Beebo, I did hear him. And the reason that I know I heard his plane is because all other air traffic was shut down at that time. I guess I just saw a lot of parallels in his life to mine. A little younger than me, but roughly the same age, same area, same, I guess, attitude towards work. Although maybe I think he acted it a little bit. You know, it just felt really personal. I saw a lot of myself in him. And you know, I remember talking to my dad that night and I was really like upset by it. And he's like, I don't know. He asked me like, why is this so upsetting to you? And I couldn't really answer. And that kind of stuck with me over the years. I, at the time, had a podcast, but it's kind of like a proto-Western Kabuki. We were doing the same kind of thing, just in a much more crude format, and it didn't really fit the narrative. What made it like more personal, what made it fit at least the context of the internet, is how I guess the extreme online right and some of the conspiracy QAnon types and whatnot tried to claim him as theirs when I just thought that was a little bit perverse and incorrect way to look at it. And I don't think that the story has ever actually really been told in the right way, at least in hindsight.
Well, and you on Western Kabuki talk about the weird online right quite a bit. And Brian and I have both been on the show, so everybody should go check those episodes out. We'll have links in the show notes. how does this sort of reflect the kind of stuff, this story, reflect the kind of stuff that you talk about on your show?
On the, I guess, Western Kabuki, the most highbrow way to pitch that show is to say it's like a subculture analysis of different kinds of ways that people use the internet to fight loneliness or something. And this is actually kind of in that alley a little bit because, you were talking about, the 4chan types who took this guy and kind of lionized him, and the QAnon people that we'll talk about a little bit later that thought he was like a based operator or something like that. And there's just kind of like tentacles that go into bigger and deeper themes sociologically.
Well, we might as well dig into some of that sociological stuff right now, because just to give a little bit of background on Richard Russell and his whole deal, this guy is going to be the protagonist of our story. And there was a really good article in Rolling Stone by Tim Dickinson, which I think we're just going to quote here. Beebo Russell loved Jesus, craft beer, and cargo shorts. He was not the kind of man you'd peg for Grand Theft Airplane. Those who loved him describe him as compassionate, reliable, God-fearing, and goofy. He was raised in a military family with a reverence for fair play. A dedication from his family on his high school senior yearbook page cites the Bible, 2 Timothy 2 verse 5, which reads, "Whoever enters an athletic competition wins the prize only when playing by the rules."
Born in the Florida Keys and nicknamed Beebo as an infant, Russell was raised from boyhood in Wasilla, Alaska, outside of Anchorage. He attended the same high school as Sarah Palin, graduating in 2008, the year that Palin was picked for the GOP ticket. Russell was a three-sport star for the Wasilla Warriors, placing 5th in the state in discus and 4th in wrestling in the 215-pound category. He was a quiet leader, recording school athletes' personal bests on their weight belts. His is still in the school gymnasium.
Russell was a brick of a young man, square-shouldered and stout with long, powerful arms. On the football field, he barreled for 327 yards, scoring 6 touchdowns as a standout senior fullback. He embraced contact, and according to friends and family, got his bell rung with some frequency. At the time, concern about football brain injury had yet to enter the mainstream. Alaska would not implement a concussion protocol for school sports until 2011.
With a shock of half-groomed brown hair and a face full of freckles, Russell was funny, extroverted, a handful, relatives would later say. They all had Beebo stories. As a high schooler, he hosted booze-free bonfires for friends. On his MySpace page, misbehaving looked like shotgunning cans of Mountain Dew with his bros. In one senior yearbook photo, he is posed atop a boulder, legs out to the side, his long arms holding up his blocky frame. His head is thrown back with a coy expression as if the prompt had been, "Give me a sexy walrus." If only we had AJ right now. "You bring such humor and unpredictability to our lives," reads his family's yearbook dedication. "As you write the rest of this story, always remember you are loved." So from this profile, I mean, we get the sense of a guy who seems pretty, normal. Just a normal kind of all-American guy, right?
Yeah, there's some very Baptist-coded behavior in there.
Yeah.
The bonfires where they shotgun Mountain Dew, that's a little close to home. And growing up in I don't really know much about the Keys. I don't know that much about Wasilla, Alaska, but these are kind of redneck places. Mm-hmm. They're pretty country. Wasilla's close-ish to Anchorage, but it's a very, very small town, and it produced the Palins, and I think you can kind of infer the rest from that.
And he moved on from Alaska to Oregon, where he was at a university, but he didn't get a lot of playing time in college. And then he moved on to the town of Coos Bay, Oregon, and that was where he joined Campus Crusade for Christ. Now, Brian, I know you know about Campus Crusade for Christ, but Caleb, do you?
Not my wheelhouse, not my milieu, so to speak.
Okay. It's our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's an old organization that got a lot of juice during the Jesus movement of the 70s. And they also produced the Jesus film. If you've ever heard of the Jesus film,
I've heard of it, but
they made that.
Sadly, it's still on my queue.
Apparently, they're just called Crew now, CRU, which is insane.
That is quite a rebrand.
The thing that you really ought to know about Campus Crusade for Christ, it's kind of like a number of other organizations such as Young Life, where the whole point is let's get young people to be more Christian. You know, really.
It's a social group for college students. Josh and I went to a Christian college, so we didn't have Campus Crusade for Christ. It's kind of precluded.
The whole campus was a crusade for Christ, baby.
Although the Gideons would come by and hand us Bibles for some reason.
But he was basically a high school mentor at Campus Crusade, and it was also while he was doing Campus Crusade that he met a woman named Hannah. And they got married in 2012 and moved to Sumner, which is a Seattle suburb east of Tacoma. Now, I don't know anything about Sumner, but this is obviously your area of subject matter expertise, Caleb. Tell me about Sumner.
Okay. Everybody assumes a lot about the Pacific Northwest, that it's some sort of like a liberal utopia. Okay. Once you get outside of like the Seattle-Tacoma metro area, it gets very Hitlerian very fast. I think that this is like kind of on the cusp of it. I grew up in a town quite like this, where it's like you're at a confluence of ideology. Sumner is a very, very kind of conservative. So you get all the shitheads that say they live in Seattle and are too scared to walk down the street that say that, but they actually live in places like Sumner.
Right.
It's really small. It's out of the way. There is nothing going on there. Some people like that. It's quaint, but there are like zero job opportunities. And because of that, I think the station of it and everything, crimes, not violent crimes, but like crimes of poverty are a lot higher there. You know, car break-ins, thefts, things of that nature are actually twice as high as the state average. At least, so these are stats from around, these are 2018 or 19 stats. I tried everything that I pulled. I tried to keep from this time, but it's also at this time was 3 times the national average. And part of that reason too was rents in this area were just exploding. I think we were like Pierce County was like the hottest real estate market out of, 2 years of financial quarters. It was something like 6 times or something like that. The rents were just going through the roof. The average rent for a place to live is like $2,000, which that comes into play later when we talk about what he was making. So tough place to be in some ways, not a fun place to live.
Well, and a big thing about when he was living in Oregon with his wife was they had started a bakery. He co-owned it, but he was kind of learning how to bake from her. And they were both kind of far away from all of their family.
Yeah.
So they moved to a place that would be closer. Of course, for him, closer meant Alaska. And there's no good compromise between like Seattle and Wasilla, Alaska, right?
Unless you want to move to like, I don't know, fucking somewhere up in the Yukon or something like that.
When he ends up working then for the airline, that gives him the ability to get some flights, right? You can get, as an employee, you can fly for free or for cheap. And that is a great lifeline for him to be able to go back to Alaska and visit family.
Specifically to Alaska with Horizon, yeah.
Horizon is a regional subsidiary of Alaska Airlines, which is one of the United States' really big airlines, right? And so if you're doing one of those shorter flights, one of the ones to get you from sort of one of the spokes in the system back to Seattle, you're probably going to be on Horizon Air. Whereas if you're flying from Seattle to, I don't know, Detroit, you're probably going to be on a flight with Alaska. And so Horizon Air serves a number of smaller markets, and they need baggage handlers in Seattle. He signs up, he gets the job, and as part of an online communications class that he ended up taking at Washington State University, he asked his coworkers whether or not they enjoyed their jobs and edited the answers together.
Do you like working as a ground service agent? Why or why not?
I do and I don't. The work here is very easy. It's not that hard. One of the good things about working here is there's good people that work here, and one of the bad things about working here is there's really bad people that work here that are not good workers.
I enjoy that it's a physical job with a lot of different opportunity, a lot of different tasks you can partake in. I enjoy the flexibility of the schedule and the flight benefits. I do not enjoy management.
So, about that management, I've got an article here from August 19, 2018 from the Seattle Times, and I'm just going to quote from it. Brandon Brown, who worked as a Horizon ground service agent for 6 years before leaving in 2017, said that he used to talk with Russell about what trips they would take. Russell, he said, was always friendly and was always reading in what little downtime they had. Every time he'd come into work, he'd always have a stack full of books, said Brown, who didn't recall the titles. He was the nicest guy. Sometimes you can work at places and some of the people there, you'd think something was a little off with them. I never in a million years thought that about him. I just don't understand.
SeaTac was the first city in the country to raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour, paving the way for much larger cities like Seattle, San Francisco, and New York. But SeaTac's law did not cover everybody. Specifically, it doesn't apply to airline employees like Horizon ground service agents.
Brown said the starting wage for ground service agents was about $12 an hour. It didn't sit well with people, Brown said. You had people up working in the restaurants. Everybody else at the airport made $15.
And of course, this is a very interesting example of how the small differences in these wages, of course, for the workers to be fighting amongst themselves, that is exactly what the corporations want, right?
And there was a monthly bonus structure to this job where you'd get like 50, anywhere from 50 to 200, depending on what kind of goals were being hit. And then they started fucking with that bonus structure too, right? Because companies forget why they implement a bullshit thing like a monthly bonus system, which is to keep people in line and keep them calm and keep them working harder so that they can get more of that
Something
money
to aspire to.
Yeah.
But then they're like, yeah, but that's really expensive, so let's take that fucking away.
Just a quick couple things to contextualize the region. $12 an hour. Remember what I said about what the average rent was there? Even if 100% of his money went to rent, he wouldn't probably be able to afford a house on his own, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Additionally, the commute, depending on what time of day he left, could be an hour or more to make $12 an hour.
And that's driving too. That's not necessarily, taking public transit from there, right?
There's no Sumner doesn't have like a line to the airport or anything like that.
A Sumner land ferry.
Yeah.
Another coworker of Beebo's, Todd Bunker, wrote the following in an August 17 opinion piece for The Stranger.
When a lot of your supervisory staff and coworkers are ex-military, you begin to realize what being expendable is. I believe Beebo was acutely aware of that because we all were. It's the kind of dehumanizing situation that could lead to what happened on August 10th.
If the environment itself isn't enough to persuade you that you are nothing more than a cog to the upper management and shareholders, there are plenty of other, even more exasperating reminders. You are making around $3 less per hour than anybody else at SeaTac, including other airline employees, restaurant employees, car rental employees, bus drivers, etc. Although there are benefits. Health insurance and stock options might be nice, but they don't pay the rent. However, a vast majority of ground service agents are men under age 30, so insurance and stock options mean nothing to them. They become empty gestures from a management who knows you'll never use them and thus cost the company little. But that's only one part of the picture. To be clear, the people I worked with were dedicated, hardworking, safety-conscious, attempting to be loyal, all of the things that are supposed to get you ahead in America. But the workers on the ground and our immediate supervisors could barely keep our heads above water. As a subsidiary of Alaska Air Group, Horizon Air is the proverbial red-headed stepchild. It is glaringly clear to everyone who works there that cost-cutting by the executive teams in order to keep the shareholders happy is the main goal. And Horizon is the first stop on that belt-tightening train.
We, the lowest level employees, knew that when the record quarterly earnings report came out, there wasn't going to be any trickle down. When I worked for Horizon, we were cursing our low-wage fate in the break room, while Alaska was spending another $2.5 billion acquiring Virgin America, got to keep up with Delta, and then investing another $2.5 billion upgrading their turboprop airplane fleet to jets. Acquisitions and sexy new jets play well at the stockholder meeting. Increased labor costs do not. Now, Caleb, this was an article that you had sent along. Do you know anybody who works in the industry or anything like that, or was it just something you found? Okay, cool. Say more.
Yeah, I actually I applied to this exact job.
Really?
Oh.
To Horizon at one point, and I had interviewed for it and everything. I don't remember what the circumstances were. I think it was because I had a second job that I liked more, even though it was part-time. It just didn't fit. But I got the hookup for this job from a friend that worked there and did this. This was a few years before this, but yeah, I do know. And this article, there's a part of it that we aren't pulling from that talks about how your shit just gets stolen all the time.
Yeah, they don't have
And-
enough lockers for everyone.
Yeah,
so you just
they don't
have to
lockers,
leave your,
and your
stuff behind.
just gets stolen. Your lunch gets stolen.
Yeah.
Your,
Which is just insane. Like, that's such a nominal expense.
And yeah, there's no coworkers aren't necessarily anything to each other because they don't know each other because people just leave the job very quickly.
exactly.
Right. Another part of the article says that there's always a job listing for Horizon.
I'm sure it's the same way to this day. If you're down and out in this area and you really need a job, you could probably, get this same job now because the turnover is just atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious, so I went on Indeed.com and looked up jobs, right? And I did indeed find a current job listing for ramp and customer service agent for Horizon Air in Oregon.
Hell yeah, dude.
And it was $16 an hour.
Yeah, dude.
All these years later. Just in general, it should be noted that the air travel industry is one of those things where it's either feast or famine. You're either making good money or you're making no money. Per the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median annual wage for baggage handlers in 2023 was $37,660. Median hourly wage there, $18.10. Now, this is compared to the national overall median annual wage for all jobs, which is $49,500, median hourly wage $23.80. So this is not a median level job. They are very much underpaying these people. And again, that median hourly wage just at the national level for baggage handlers, $18. Horizon is underpaying even by those standards at $16 an hour. And just to sort of rant a little bit more about this, right? Like, good paying jobs in the air travel industry do exist. Pilots, co-pilots, flight engineers, obviously that's the big one. And in that same Bureau of Labor Statistics data, we see the annualized wage median for those jobs as $219,140. That's good money. But the thing is, qualifying for those jobs takes years of training and experience. And even flight attendants, who definitely make more than these baggage handlers do, around $75,000 a year industry-wide, they similarly have to put in their time to climb the ranks because generally speaking, those salaries are based on how long you've been doing the job.
And also, flight attendants do not get paid until the doors on the plane close.
That's right.
Even though they are doing their jobs before that point.
And if it weren't for the unions, which all of the airlines except for Delta have unionized flight attendants, there's no way they'd even be making that much money,
Oh, yeah.
So that grunt work, all of the grunt work that it takes to get to the point where you're making a decent wage, that is usually happening not at the big national airlines, but at the regional airlines, places like Horizon. Because generally speaking, these regional airlines are not subject to the same lucrative labor contracts as the major national airlines, nor is there price competition to, to bump those wages up. So in other words, everyone from the flight deck to the tarmac is getting paid dramatically less than their equivalents at Alaska, American, United, and Delta for the exact same labor.
Yeah, that's another really cool thing, that you can work for Alaska Air, but it's not the same as working for Alaska Air.
Right.
Because you're at a subsidiary.
Even the flight attendants, their salaries are what they are, but like a lot of them sleep in like RVs in like their home, I guess, port cities or whatever, and they stay there and they fly around, so they just never actually, they get to travel a lot and it's very cool, but they don't really get to see their family a whole lot because they're constantly on the go, and not an easy job.
No. And I mean, think about all the things that you have to deal with doing that job, all of the fucking bullshit,
Yeah, I mean, this is, especially after 9/11, it's a very, very high stakes job.
Right.
I mean, even before 9/11, right, we had hijackings left and right throughout the 70s and everything. It's a fucking plane. It could crash and everyone die. You have to be aware of that. And you have to be, if you're in those dangerous circumstances, you're the person that everyone has to depend upon. But that's true of, even the people on the ground. They're not necessarily facing that same level of danger, although there's still quite a bit of danger. You're around planes with big turbines and everything. But you are responsible for a lot of very important stuff. If you know people who use wheelchairs, they don't like to fly because those wheelchairs get destroyed a lot. Well, obviously it's because you have weird hiring situations and weird working practices down on the ramp. So no one's going to care about your luggage. They are just going to throw it in there.
Yeah, I mean, they're not paid enough to give a shit about it.
No. No, and they have to have all this clearance. They have to have all this scrutiny. You have to go through security every single time you go to work. That shit sucks. For $13 an hour?
So, back to August 10, 2018. It's 2:36 p.m. Beebo Russell clocks into work at SeaTac. He's wearing a t-shirt that says "The sky's no limit" on it. And it's pretty clear that he has a plan in mind because at 7:15 p.m., he gets onto the runway and gets into one of those tugs, the tugs that pull the airplanes out, and tows that Q400 out onto the runway. He releases the plane, jumps into it, and at 7:33 p.m., Beebo takes off toward Mount Rainier, and all air traffic out of SeaTac is immediately grounded.
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.